We'll get underway. We'll reconvene the Corporate Strategic Committee meeting and welcome Alan. We've been waiting patiently for you. And
Chairman, my apologies.
No, it's Alan. We've just.
I was at a conference in Gisborne, but apart from getting back, I had a problem with my car with the power steering failing intermittently, and it wasn't my 20-year-old Ford Corona. It's a 9-month-old Ford Focus.
Oh, so it's not the not the Jaguar.
I thought it might have been the Jag.
Alan, what we've been able to do is shuffle the agenda, and in the hope that you might arrive. And we've reconvened the Corporate Strategic Committee, and we'll have our deliberation of agenda item 6. Now, and then that'll be preceded by the Regional Council meeting and the long-term plan.
Chair, we should apologise to the people who may be watching that
Yes.
who have come in and expecting the council meeting to
Yes,
start.
so if you're expecting a council meeting, you've got a bonus this morning with the Corporate Strategic meeting. So the cast of thousands online will be well informed. James, we've got agenda item 6. How are we going to address that? Are you looking to walk through that?
Jess and I might do a just a double act on this one. So perhaps if Jess introduces the paper and speak to it as well.
Thank you, councillors. So item 6 is a paper which outlines some of the decisions that need to be made. We're just seeking feedback from councillors for the content to draft a letter of expectation to HBRIC. So this item is of significance given its ownership of our largest strategic asset, the Port of Napier. And following the item of the review of the Capital Structure Phase 2 report, there are obviously some considerable outstanding decisions to be made around the future mandate of our investment company. So I would sort of take the paper as read and happy to talk through any of the items. We've outlined some issues or some suggestions around potential change to the governance structure of the investment company. We're seeking some feedback from councillors around the mandate going forward for the investment company. And also we will need to include in our letter of expectation to HBRIC some direction around expectations for the dividend for the next 3 years. So I'm happy to either pass over to you, James, or to...
Look, I'll just make a couple of other comments. There, noted in the paper is a letter that has been received by the council from the board of HBRIC that was tabled at a workshop recently for all councillors. That letter noted the fact that HBRIC has been in a bit of a holding position, obviously, since the decision not to invest in the Ruataniwha water storage scheme. And as such, it has become a holding company for all intents and purposes for the residual assets of the RWSS and the port assets, with not a great deal of decision making and governance to be undertaken. That letter recommends that the council give consideration to reducing the number of directors. Consistent with that, we have recommended in this paper that the number of directors be reduced to 3. Very much open to the council whether or not they consider that to be, whether you consider that to be an appropriate number. But look, in addition to that, they gave a range of options in their letter, including which could be to have, instead of independent directors, that the directors be drawn from council, and could also include the chief executive of the council, on the basis that there aren't significant commercial activities and transactions to be governed at this point in time, and secondly, to reduce the cost of running HBRIC. The paper does note our recommendation that the administrative and accounting functions for HBRIC come under direct control of council, and we reduce some cost there. but also if we had councillor directors and or chief executives serving on there, there would be potentially no governance costs as well. So this is about rationalising the governance and the related costs of HBRIC at a time when it's not undertaking any significant commercial activity. Having said that, there is a possibility in the future, depending on what happens with any capital transaction around the port, which may or may not occur, for more activity to arise. And also the council has signalled an interest in investing commercially into forestry activity, and it is recommended in the paper that HBRIC be directed to explore that. Should that grow into a genuine set of investment activities, it would be appropriate at that time to review the governance and see whether or not there are other skills that need to be brought to bear. So it's a bit of a holding position for the time being, and we're forcing this decision, if you like, as a consequence of the need to revise the statement of intent.
Thanks, James. Councillors, I think for the benefit of the debate, I wonder whether we can, as opposed to focusing on the recommendations at 1.2, in fact that we focus our attention on paragraph 5 of the paper, and paragraph 5 offers essentially three ways of going forward. 5.1, which is to essentially move the ownership of the port back to council, winding down HBRIC, but retaining the HBRIC as a shelf company. 5.2 is the status quo with respect to the Port of Napier, that is leaving the Port of Napier with HBRIC but reducing or narrowing the mandate for HBRIC, essentially to containing it to the management of the Napier Port asset. And obviously 3 is a freshly mandated or increased mandate for HBRIC to not only hold the Port of Napier, to hold other assets and to deliver other commercial strategic entities for council. Each of those options is then subject to paragraph 6 considerations, the composition of such. After we've decided what sort of entity we want, we may then wish to move to item 6 to decide what sort of composition we should be having. Are there any other variations on consideration of this other than those 3 options or variations? Councillor Belford.
Just a clarification of 5.1, the way it's worded, 5.11, winding HBRIC down, that clearly would involve moving ownership of Port of back to council. 5.12, if HBRIC is sitting there as a shelf or a passive holding company, as it were, at the moment, that wouldn't necessarily, given arguments we've heard before about not complicating negotiations regarding the port and its structure. There was an argument made, well, we shouldn't therefore mess with its ownership at the moment, which is HBRIC. When is the meaning of 5.12 that the shelf company does continue to own, or
No, not under that option.
So these are just providing options, but we're not recommending 5.1.1 or 5.1.2.
Chair.
But in the event that Port of Napier was transferred back to council, then the option is either you wind it up or you could still retain it as a shelf company for a future purpose. But noting that the company is carrying debt at the moment, and if the port is taken off, that then effectively it becomes insolvent. So there are a range of transactions that would need to occur to level all that out before you could shelve the company effectively. And all of that related to a transaction taking the port off HBRIC's balance sheet and directly onto the council's balance sheet will take some time and involve some consultation.
Councillor.
Chair, isn't that the decision that we've got to make first? And this is a sequence. So currently the port is owned by HBRIC, and there was many financial complications, in that, relating to financial and taxation. And shouldn't we be making a decision, which I would strongly support, is that HBRIC Limited continue to own the port? I'd like other people's view on that, because when we get over that hurdle, we can then say, what else does HBRIC do and what does HBRIC look like? But that decision's the first decision we need to make, in my view. Otherwise, we just go around in circles.
And that's why I raised the question I did. You can put it that way, that owning the port now is a matter of convenience as we pursue the financial issues that need to be pursued, as opposed to saying that's the long-run solution to ownership. I'm not prepared to say that's the long-term solution to ownership, but I can see, based on arguments that have been made to us, that in the short run, that's the most, forgive me, convenient way to do it. But who is actually going to drive that set of discussions is a different matter to me.
No, that's right. So you're exactly in my camp, Tom. We need to make a decision. Are we in agreement with HBRIC Limited continuing to own the port? And once we decide that, we can decide all the other things that fall out of that.
Mr. Chair, it might be helpful if I just note that this is effectively for 1 year, so the statement of intent does need to be reviewed and revised annually. This paper is about the content of the statement of intent, so you're very much making this decision in relation to this 1 year as opposed to any longer term or strategic question.
Well, I think we would be wise to make a sequential decision around this, and at the moment I'm reading this order as being reasonable, but are there any other variations that people may wish to have explored in this discussion? If not, we might then move to the very first 5.1, moving ownership report of Napier back to Council. Councillor Dick.
Mr. Chairman, just remind us or me of the tax or other implications of the port ownership being resumed by the council or otherwise.
Yeah, so thank you, Councillor Dick. There's no specific tax advantages to having HBRIC retain ownership of the port. The port would be obliged to pay tax whether they sit under the HBRIC ownership or whether they were sitting directly on the council's balance sheet. But there are obviously taxation implications of moving the Port of Napier ownership out of HBRIC and back to the council, in that there's a amount of debt sitting on HBRIC balance sheet, and effectively the port is the only trading asset at the moment returning an income, so that creates some tax challenges for their solvency going forward that we would need to address.
Yeah, and are there not accumulated losses that can be written off against port income in HBRIC?
There are some imputation credit balances sitting within the port that we would need to consider in terms of utilising those.
And also the HBRIC's tax losses in relation to the RWSS potentially as well, although we don't at this point in time know precisely the quantum of those, because it does go to the current process that they are in, that the council directed them to do, which is to seek potential purchases of those assets.
So effectively, if you moved the port back into council ownership, you'd lose those offset opportunities.
Potentially.
Potentially.
Or potential tax losses, so.
Yeah.
So certainly our advice at this point in time is the complexities and the risks of moving it at this point in time relative to the benefits don't warrant moving it, and our recommendation is to leave it with the HBRIC structure for now.
Councillor Hewitt.
Thank you. Given that the staff recommendation is to leave the structure current, I'm just having a look at the recommendations on page 12, and one of the questions that comes to light is that if we are directing HBRIC to explore commercial forestry, are we going to then be providing a suitable budget for that exploration? And have you had that discussion with the HBRIC management and board as to their willingness to engage in that activity?
Yes, so they will need some working capital to explore that, and one of the questions that they'll need to work through is whether they seek working capital from the council by way of a shareholders advance, or whether they simply use their current ability to borrow against their current assets to fund that activity. But those discussions have just begun, essentially, and once we get your direction here that this is a path you want to go down, there will need to be some work done to quantify the extent of that work.
Is there any indication from anyone around the table to do anything to actually move the ownership of the port from HBRIC as the first topic? I'm not picking that there is. So in principle, I think we could move on to 5.2. I appreciate the recommendations there. I'm just asking if we put those to the side for the moment, and then if they are relevant after we've made some in-principle discussions, that we can revisit them. Is that all right with you to progress it that way? So we now get to 5.2. Before going, so we're confident that there's no option, Tom, in regard to 5.1.2 to essentially retain HBRIC as a shelf company, so that level of minimisation, if you like, but including the Port of Napier, which is subtly and marginally different from 5.2.
You asked, so I'll answer. I guess my view is that there are two projects ahead of us here. One project that involve serious looking at commercial activities. One is the port, its financing, et cetera, et cetera. The other is the prospective commercial investment in forestry. And my view is that each of those should be pursued on their merits separately by a small team that is appropriate to oversee those investigations. I don't see HBRIC contributing to that whatsoever. So when I see 5.1.2, I think of HBRIC as a shelf company that is there purely as a matter of convenience to abet the outcome of basically of the port discussion. Period. That's all. So it certainly isn't 5.3 in my mind, and I don't see it being given any responsibility based on its performance to date to pursue either of these two options. No one has ever made a case that brilliant presentation we saw from the port about its decade or more of growth, that HBRIC had anything whatsoever to do with that. It's just been another layer on top of a well-functioning board of directors and a machine that has produced, great growth for us over the years. So, all right, so that, so I don't see that they've made any contribution to the well-being of the port. So why would we put in its hands negotiating a complicated transaction like this, as opposed to getting a dedicated team that has the requisite skill set, and off they go and they oversee the port as it does its thing, and off we go. Same with the forestry. So I was hoping that what 5.1.2 meant was that it just sat there, and it will only need a director or two or three to sit on the shelf and do whatever that entails. But meanwhile, the serious work is being done by two teams that are reporting directly to this council.
Thank you.
So, Chairman, could I comment on that? Look, there's a couple of considerations sitting behind the recommendation here. The first of which is that in order to fund some due diligence work around commercial forestry, the most expeditious way in which we can do that is advancing some capital to HBRIC. There's nothing in the current annual plan budget to provide for that. It's something which councillors have indicated enthusiasm to do, and we could either wait till the LTP comes through, assuming that there is resource in there to pursue that. But if we want to get going sooner, then the most expeditious way is that. Secondly,
where does the money come from?
So it would come from our investment income, and we would be or it could be that HBRIC borrows to fund that activity, and it would be investment income used on the basis that we're pursuing an investment activity upon which there would be returns, and so that then relates to tax, which is that if those funds lead to a commercial deal, then they may be able to be capitalised, and there is of course the tax benefit of having a company that has other assets against which the ebbs and flows of income from forestry related assets can be tax maximised, if you like.
Thanks, James. We can come back to that issue when we get to what the entity looks like. I probably disagree significantly from what you've said, but and I'm coming to Peter very shortly, but I'm just really wanting, before moving off 5.1.2 and on to 5.2, wanting to make the distinction that Tom has just made between what we mean by the proposed entity. So Peter, can you enlighten us, please?
Yeah, so no, I'm agreed with the proposition that it would be pointless to move the shareholding in the port back to HBRC right now, but unfortunately I don't see things quite as black and white as Tom does. What I see is a whole lot of moving parts here, which Tom's mentioned some of, which is the potential future disposition of the port in some way or other. There's the 60 or the 80 million, depending on how much it is, that needs to be invested, maybe in the short term, maybe longer term than that. There's the future potential funds that flow from the sale or disposition of the port. We need advice on what to do with that money. And then there's the management of other commercial assets that we have. There's the leasehold land, there's our current forestry assets, and there's the works group. And then there's the future potential forestry investment that we've been talking about, and that forms part of our long-term plan. So there's a whole lot of investments and dispositions and so forth that I'm not the least bit clear in my mind as to how they should best be managed or where they should properly sit. And some of them might sit within an HBRIC, some of them might be better to sit just within a business unit which has some independence within council, or there may be some other appropriate structure. And I actually think before we make any decision on this, we need to get advice from somewhere. We need to be able to present all of these issues and potential future investments that we're interested in making, and we need to get advice on how we structure them and where we make those investments. And we don't, today, sitting at this table, I don't believe we have the right, we don't have the right advice on how to structure this. So my view at the moment is that what has to happen with HBRIC is it has to go into a holding pattern of some sort. We need to minimise the cost of running HBRIC because it's not going to be doing anything until we get the advice on what it should be doing. And to me, that means that probably we should take one of the pieces of advice that you're proposing, which is that HBRIC in the meantime comes back to us, and it has maybe the chair, the chief executive, and another councillor as its directors, so that it's going to be run at a minimal cost to us until we get the advice we need.
All right. I'm sensing that, I'll come back to you soon, Alan. I'm sensing that essentially we're ready to move to 5.2. That is the status quo in respect to the Port of Napier. So ownership remains with HBRIC, but we have a much more revised, narrowly mandated investment company that is responsible at this stage for managing the Napier Port asset and ensuring dividend maximisation. I'm not even sure about that bit, but at least it does retain ownership of the Port of Napier and whatever consequential elements that requires. So I'm seeing us ready to move to that point. But Alan, you wanted to.
Well, Mr. Chairman, yeah, I agree with that proposition that it should essentially own the port in the meantime and undertake the governance responsibilities that flow with that, and it should be, I believe, left in a position where it can take on some, if not all, of the prospective ventures that have been mentioned here today. And I actually believe that if we're going to do that, we should leave the company with at least a couple of independent directors, but at the same time keep our present councillor director appointees, cut their salaries in half if need be, and that's not silly because the responsibilities have come right back. But we need that, I believe we need that interlinkage. I mean, I was in Gisborne yesterday and observed how not to run a council-owned investment company. Like investing all of their considerable wealth, virtually all of it, outside of Poverty Bay, except for the port. No local directors except the mayor, flying people in from all over New Zealand, and in fact actively working against the re-establishment of the rail link from Gisborne to Napier on the basis that they believe that they're protecting their port, which is a load
Why they
bloody
call it Poverty
nonsense.
Bay.
Sounds like HBRIC to me.
So that's how an HBRIC shouldn't be run. And by refining it back down and making its task very specific and retaining the interrelationship between council and the investment company, then you protect yourself from those follies.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bailey, please, I'd like to hear from you.
Thank you, Chair. What Councillor Bevan was discussing, I think, is quite important in that there are so many. Got so many balls in the air at the moment that until we seek some independent advice as to what the best way forward is going to be, I don't think we can draw any conclusions about the long-term future of HBRIC. But if we were to look at it right today, and that may, who knows exactly how long that's going to be, but right now we're spending a fair bit of money, or the directors are spending a fair bit of money on fees for themselves, which we're no longer get any value out of. So in terms of making HBRIC into a shelf company at the moment, just to look after the port in the meantime, and taking it down to, as I think Councillor Bevan suggested, the chair, the CEO, and another councillor director, I'd be quite happy to see it in that direction in the interim.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, if it's running the port, it's not a shelf company. It's confusion there.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we if
Holding
decided
company would be a
collectively that description 5.1.2 is not a goer.
Yeah, I think we've moved on from that that opportunity. Just we explored it, but dismissed it, I think. So we are looking for essentially a company that operates, but it's the extent of the mandate that I think we're going to have to consider. Mr. Paku.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I take in mind that this is the draft SOI, so it's for the financial year 2018-2019. So it's for a period of 1 year. So it's not as though you're talking about the long-term future of HBRIC here. You're talking about the short term. And so from that point of view, I'm pretty much of the opinion that the status quo should remain, that it is active, it isn't shelved, it can't be shelved. But I do take on the recommendation that has come from the HBRIC itself, and it's saying that you should consider reducing the number of directors. That's come from them. And I think you should take that on board. That's pretty good advice. And they've made that advice based on the amount of work that they're actually doing. We understand from the conversations that took place prior to lunch that situation will no doubt change in regards to the Napier Port, and the consequence of that, the situation will change for the Hawke's Bay Regional Council. And so it'll allow you the time to see where those conversations go, and at some point seek further external advice around what does the future hold and what entities would be best served, the Hawke's Bay Regional Council and the wider community of Hawke's Bay. Kia ora.
Councillor Belford.
I'll continue if there's nobody else. I'm basically aligned with what Peter has said, but the optics of what is about to happen here in the next 6 months or so is that first we're going to later in this meeting be blessing a significant rate increase, and we're going to go to the public and say we are, as a council, championing a significant step change in our commitment to the environment, and we hope the public sees that that is a wise thing to do and is willing to shoulder the burden for doing it. We're also going to be signaling in one way or the other that we are taking a serious look at freeing capital from the port, perhaps an unintended consequence of de-risking the port and doing other noble things. But all of a sudden, there is going to be a spotlight put on that a significant amount of resource is going to be coming available to further the objectives of this council, and and the question then on the table is, and that could amount to hundreds of millions of dollars being available for investment this way, that way, the other way, however. And the question in front of then the public is, who is going to direct that process? Who's going to spend that money? Who do we trust to spend that money? And while this is only a one-year extension, as just been said, it's a one-year extension in this very pregnant moment in time, and I'm not aware of a constituency for HBRIC outside of this room. I mean, I think the whole constituency for it is sitting right here, other than a couple of directors who aren't here at the moment of HBRIC. There's no constituency for it in the public, and so to the cleaner the break is between what this entity has been and who it has been, and going forward, the better off we're going to be. To say that we are launching into a brave new world here of significant rate increases, significant program expansion, significant investment in environmental futures and so forth.
Are we in the right meeting, Chair?
And we're going to basically imply that we're leaving that in the hands of a thoroughly discredited entity.
Let's just
is why I think we need to be a little clearer than just sort of letting it ride. It's not advantageous to let it ride.
Thanks.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Hang on. Thanks, Tom. Let's put those thoughts on pause, and I think we're in a position now to, in principle, at the end of this discussion, recommend to staff that we adopt the principle of 5.2.
So, Chair, could I please just make a couple of comments in relation to forestry, because it's not clear to me that councillors understand the situation we're in. We are proposing to release a consultation document at our long-term plan which signals an interest in investing in commercial forestry. Happens to be to the tune of up to $100 million. We don't have any ability to put any specific funding into the long-term plan in terms of the council's own accounts for the council to directly be the investor of that, not through HBRIC or a council-controlled organisation, so directly from the council, because we have no detail about the nature of those investments. And so the audit advice we clearly had going through the development of the long-term plan is we couldn't even put a holding position in because we couldn't justify any specific numbers. So, therefore, the long-term plan that is being adopted for consultation this afternoon does not have any money set aside for commercial investment in forestry. The only way in which the council will be able to progress that is through a council-controlled organisation. Now, you've got one in the form of HBRIC, and the advice in the paper is you're looking at 9 months to disestablish this one, and you would need to go through a formal consultation process to create a new one. So the point being is you have a CCO now that has a broad mandate that could hit the ground running in terms of the council's aspirations in this regard. And if you don't wish to use HBRIC for pursuing forestry, you're in for quite a long delay and quite a lot of process before you will be an ability to do so.
Thanks, thanks, James. Thanks for your advice. My own view is that it's somewhat of a red herring and shroud waving before we need to consider how we progress our forestry venture, should we decide to undertake that
venture
activity.
that is signalled in a document here. We're about to send to 60,000 people in Hawke's Bay that says, I'll read it, we also plan to use our balance sheet to invest up to $100 million.
Thanks, Tom.
In commercial reforestation.
Thank you, Tom. I'm suggesting that we don't, at this point, define precisely what the future may hold for the entity. We simply agree that we want to maintain it as an active entity, and at the moment has a narrow mandate to manage the port investment for the time being. Should we decide to mandate it differently, having decided after consultation whether we do forestry or any other venture, we will then mandate it accordingly. I don't think we need to progress that far now. So I'm suggesting that we ask staff to consider the recommendation today based on 5.2, that it's limited to that. You've got scope between now and the 28th of March to define that more clearly. But in the next step for us at this stage is to progress to the issues around paragraph 6 of the paper, and that is the composition of the entity that we've just described.
So Chair, can I just make sure everybody's very clear? I will not be progressing anything in relation to commercial investments in forestry because I have no budgets in the current annual plan to do so.
Thanks,
so
James.
we will not be progressing.
We've received your advice on that, and we've got a couple of weeks to define the mandate for HBRIC, and in that time I'm sure we'll have come to some conclusion about how broad that mandate would be.
Just pause. So, James, what would you add into 5.2 to cover that?
What I'm telling you is that within the current annual plan, there is no budget to undertake any work on exploring commercial investment in forestry. There is nothing in the long-term plan other than the provision to use our balance sheet, which would need to go through a CCO because we cannot put any specific numbers because we have no shape to any deal. So the only way you're going to be able to progress commercial investment in forestry is doing it through a CCO. It's either going to be HBRIC or creating a whole new one in the fullness of time. If you want to create a new one in the fullness of time, that's fine,
thanks,
but it won't be till after the 1st of July.
Thank you. We can consider options as we go.
We don't have to deal with that today in any case.
We don't have to deal with it. No, we don't.
And I mean, this conference I went to yesterday was addressed by a couple of specialists in terms of, you know, the government assistance for the million trees or whatever it is. I've got those papers coming. They should be here tomorrow, and it's quite illuminating the amount of support that's come, that potentially will come from government. So we can be informed and then instruct, if we deem it appropriate, HBRIC or whoever, to progress down a particular path.
Can we?
Well, not if you have amended their SOI to take away their ability to invest in such. You then have to do another amendment to the SOI, which has its own convoluted process in terms of consultation with the directors. This is your opportunity to just set this up and get this ball rolling.
Just leave it flexible.
Well, that was what we were proposing by 5.3. The existing recommendations. It was to go away and explore this opportunity, and it was a funding mechanism to do so. But look,
I think the scope to introduce the issues that the Chief Executive is referring to, which doesn't contravene if we progressed the 5.2 option. So I want to now move on, having in principle considered the vehicle looking like 5.2.
I like 5.3, so how do we're in an argument?
If you like 5.3, you go to these recommendations here. You move and I'll see.
Not all recommendations, but
So what I'm asking, if you've got an alternative, what I'm asking is that a recommendation is crafted in the next few minutes. If we ask that a recommendation is crafted that looks like 5.2, and now we proceed to 6, which is potential composition thereof, we can then further instruct staff about what the recommendation should be like.
Can I get a point of clarification, Mr. Chairman, from the CEO? James? A point of clarification, James. So if I was to read this that the status quo in respect to the to HBRIC remains, would that not actually cover any investment, future investment?
Yes, it would. The status quo for HBRIC is a broad investment mandate to invest in a range of asset classes, diversify risk, and certainly forestry is aligned with that. So status quo is no problem. What is a problem is a significant narrowing down for the port to simply be a holding company for the port.
Yep.
Sorry, for the HBRIC.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Is there anything wrong with the recommendations in 1.2 on page 12?
Certainly not the staff's view, which is why we recommended them.
Right. Well, look, if at the end of this discussion we've come up with a set of recommendations which look like 5.2, and someone wants to consider a recommendation that looks like 5.3, we can consider those and vote on them. But at the moment, I suggest we move to 6. So consider that structure. Of course, 5.2 doesn't exclude consideration of the revised mandate could very well be a look at a particular asset class or investment that we may wish HBRIC to undertake.
Well, it doesn't say that.
Well, it doesn't yet, but we could make it look like that.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move that the HBRIC board consist of 2 or a maximum of 3 independent directors, together with the 2 existing council directors, with their remuneration adjusted downwards to reflect the smaller task. That's my motion.
I'd second that.
So we've got a mover and a seconder that the HBRIC directorship comprise what, Alan?
2 or a maximum of 3 independent directors.
2 or 3, a maximum of 3 independent directors, and the current
2
council
council directors with a remuneration
So that's been
adjusted.
seconded. Is there any consideration of that? Any questions around that?
If I could speak to it, Mr. Chairman, again, it fits in with this holding thing. It leaves a structure in place that will possess some skills and some capabilities, and which should be able to move on whatever further instructions this council decides to offer to that entity.
Councillor Wilson?
Only to add, considering the scale of discussions that will ensue around our capital structure review, we need some grunt at the table. Independent.
Are there any other speakers?
Not decrying our two councillor directors, of course.
So we've got the resolution on the board. Now, are there any? Mr. Paku.
So I certainly go along with the recommendation. I do have reservations in regards to reducing their remuneration, given the fact of what Councillor Wilson's last comment was about having grunt at the table.
Just the councillor.
Just the councillors absolutely agree with.
That's okay.
Well, I'm resigning then.
I'm going to oppose it. And the reason, I've thought a lot about this too. I support a compromise between what Tom's saying, Peter Bevan's saying, and James is saying. I don't want to enter into, in the first instance, I don't want to enter into a structure that limits our ability to talk about our reforestation program and our partnership with iwi on that. That would be a disaster for us, I think. Now that doesn't, of course, this resolution doesn't limit that discussion. But when we do enter the HBRIC board, because I agree with the interim ownership of the port, and it's a year while we figure out things, and in that transaction we would employ specialist people to assist us in that transaction, although you're going to have the flag staff guys working away there. We just want someone to interpret their language, but it's a specialist. And I acknowledge that actually Blair is a specialist in this area, so perhaps he's the chap we're talking to. But in forestry, there is no one there in forestry, on reforestry. So that goes to Tom's kaupapa that we have, when we do these things, we have specialist people on board to help us do that. And as you go into a new venture, and we've only got one in front of us, let's face it. So you would, the small board, more along the lines of what Peter's suggesting, would then bring on a couple of specialist people to talk to us about that. So in all other matters, there's nothing to do. And I just want to go back a piece here, because I did have a vision similar to the new chair of HBRICS, that we did create a very dynamic investment company, but it's not a vision that I can get across the table with other councillors, and so I accept that. So if that's not going to be the case, then and if the case is we're looking at all the options in regard to the port, which we have to do, then I think we should severely reduce it and reduce the overheads, but in that reduction, don't shut the door on us talking to experts on reforestation, because our constituency want that to happen. So I don't know, it's the mishmash of what's proposed, but the closest one is Peter Bevan by far, and perhaps I would agree to add one commercial person, maybe two to that, but I do want to look at holding our overheads back down too. If we're not going to do the vision of the large investment company, then we need to cut our cloth to suit, and we're not doing that. So pull our horns in and save costs and get experts when we need experts. So I'll be very reluctant to go forward with this one, because it's just a status quo really, reduced.
Councillor Belford.
Yeah, I'm also going to oppose the motion for just a very simple reason. I think it is time for the public to see their elected councillors in charge of our direction. We're making very big decisions over the next few months here. I don't want any commercial appointed shoulder tap people involved here. I was elected to represent people of Hawke's Bay. I earned my seat at this table. I want to set that direction. I'm not going to hand it off to anybody.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bevan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Look, I also will be not supporting this motion because for me it's putting the cart before the horse. Form follows function, and we haven't decided what the function of HBRIC is yet, and until we've made that decision, we should not start populating with a whole bunch of directors who probably shouldn't be there. So I'm opposed to this.
Are there any other views around this? Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Chair. I'm struggling with this particular motion as well. Simply, I think we need to have a clean break from the HBRIC of the past. It acknowledged, like a breasting period, and then we can get back into it again. And I don't think that by retaining independent directors is going to do that sufficiently in the minds of the public. I think we need to be, the public needs to be a lot more confident about the function of HBRIC going forward, given the debacle of the Rotaniffer.
Thank you, Councillor. And before handing back to the movers, I'm similarly of a mind that we need to minimise our position at this time. I'm really interested, perhaps in probably two, an independent and a councillor director, possibly three. So I can't support this particular combination. I think it needs to be less than that. So I'm unfortunately unable to support that. But I do want to take the opportunity to say this is only an interim arrangement, that we can craft the entity whichever way we want, and we can do it in the short term or the longer term, whatever it takes, and in the meantime work on what its mandate should be. So I just can't support this current scenario. If there's anyone prepared to move any amendment that may get us over the line, I don't know. Councillor Wilson.
Well, you don't need an amendment. I mean, put the motion, get it off the table, and then let's get on to something else.
Would you want to speak, Councillor?
Just very briefly. Look, the intent of the motion: 2 or maximum 3 independent directors and 2 councillor directors. That is trimming it right back. The independent directors have already adjusted their remuneration levels downwards significantly, and I suggest that the 2 councillors, if they want to remain on, should be prepared for theirs to be adjusted downwards as well. So it's minimising cost, but it's leaving the organisation with some skills and ability. And I mean, Councillor Belford may continue to criticise as much as he likes. I don't accept what he says. I think it's important that if you're deciding to keep the company and to give it a core task of taking care of the governance responsibilities in relation to ownership of the port for a short term, and then taking on whatever this council may wish to delegate it by separate decisions, then you need core competence there, and I believe 2 independents, 2 councillor directors, adjustments to remuneration levels, it does that.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour will say aye.
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 Those against will say no.
No.
The
Abstain.
noes have it. An
Please
abstention.
note I abstained.
Do you want a division on this?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, call for division. Those in favour will raise their hand. That's 3-4. Those against will raise their hand. The resolution is lost.
And abstain.
Oh, sorry. My apologies, Councillor. One abstention.
You're discussing them.
Yeah, my apologies. So the resolution is lost. Is there an alternative resolution, please? Councillor Belford.
I'd like to propose that the representatives of, or that the reconstituted HBRIC consist of our chairman, Peter Bevan, and our chief executive.
So we have a mover that there'll be three director appointments to HBRIC, one being the chair of the regional council, second being Councillor Bevan, the third being the chief executive. Is there a seconder for that resolution? Councillor Bailey. We have a resolution on the table. Councillor Belford, would you want to speak to that?
Just consistent with my previous statement.
Councillor Bailey.
Same.
Any other speakers? Councillor Wilson.
Chairman, you're doing
Sorry,
away with...
Councillor Wilson,
Right,
I'll call you.
Thank you, Chair. Look, the HBRIC journey's been fascinating. It ended up the recipient of the work for Ruataniwha in the absence of any other company. In hindsight, it would have been better to set up that third vehicle early in the piece and leave HBRIC to get on and do its holding function. Throughout that journey, which was, as I say, as people have differing memories of, unfortunately, but there's some pretty simple facts there. One main fact which we went through and subsequently changed was we couldn't get independent advice from our CEO as the member or the CEO of that of the board, and I will be opposing this on the basis that the CEO is part of this when I want that person to give me independent advice as a councillor. That was one key learning out of the previous iteration. As I say, Ruataniwha ended up in HBRIC by default because there was no other entity, and in hindsight we should have created the working party to get on with it. So I can't support this if our CEO is a member of that board and not available to give me independent advice.
Councillor Dick.
Oh, well, I just reiterate that point that the CEO would be conflicted. It's entirely inappropriate that he serves as a director on the...
We'll take the chief executive.
Look, it's not entirely unorthodox. There are other CCOs around New Zealand where the chief executive of the council serves as a director, as I understand it, although I couldn't give you the exact examples. It was an option that was put forward in the letter from the HBRIC board, but I would say that it is particularly it's particularly problematic if HBRIC is going to get into a broad range of commercial players in which you are going to want independent advice. I think it is appropriate for a holding company, and so that's the key distinction, really.
Thank you. Thanks for that advice. Are there any other speakers on the resolution?
I'd like to speak
Councillor
on it. As James has pointed out, essentially HBRIC wrote us a letter, and essentially that is their option B. So this is an option which has come from the HBRIC chair. So I don't think it's out of order. Certainly in the commercial sector, it's not out of order for the CEO of a holding company to be a director of a subsidiary company. And matter of fact, that would be the absolute norm. So I don't know how we go down that track. I was just wondering whether the movers would consider having one commercial director as well.
I fail to see the point, Chair.
Sorry?
I fail to see the point. I mean, if the time comes, absolutely.
Oh, as the time comes.
Okay. We've had debate on this. Councillor Bevan.
Yeah, look, I'd like to move a couple of extra recommendations or motions to add to the one we're currently debating. I don't want to modify that one, but I think that I'd like to see the following motions added. Firstly,
Aren't you conflicted as a nominee?
You are.
Well, perhaps to get around that, Councillor Bevan, we could look at separate resolutions to that
that's
effect.
fine.
So we've got the
I'll
resolution.
get you move them subsequently.
Okay, so we'll stand aside for the moment. So we've got the we've had the speakers for and against. Are there any other speakers for the resolution before I pass back to Mr. Parker?
Yeah. I take on board what you've said, Tom, in regards to I think Ruataniwha situation in regards to HBRIC. But I would say that councils also have a part to play in that as well. After all, you were the final decision makers. So to lump it all onto the companies, onto the HBRIC, is actually a bit short-sighted.
Councillor Belford.
Just finishing on that.
Apologies.
Look, I certainly believe when HBRIC was first muted, the advice was that there needed to be some independence to that group, and by putting it back into the hands of of the regional council, you could potentially creating a rod for your own back here, and a big one. And we're only talking, as the SOI says, is for the financial year 2018 to 2019. There's plenty of time for corrections to take place as and when needed. The issue with the port is not going to be resolved in 6 months. You'll be lucky to get there in 18. Let alone 24, be getting closer to it. Because those are not small decisions. Those are big decisions. Kia ora. I will not be voting in favour of it. Based on the fact that,
Mr. Mohi?
Yes, I totally agree with Mike, and just remind those behind me, I don't vote. Sorry, can't get a vote. You'll be aware of the national debate about the lack of women on the directorships, etc. And here we're going down a path again of cutting a woman out of the picture.
Councillor Belford.
So just to sum up, the point that that this is a one-year thing is an important point. This is precisely when we should be sending the signal that this motion sends, that at this point, while we're feeling our way through what our overall investment look, our level of effort ought to be, et cetera, this is precisely the time when it should be perceived by the public that elected officials are steering the ship.
Thank you, Councillor Belford. I will put the recommendation. All those in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Those against will say no.
No.
Division called for. Division called for. All those in favour will raise their hand. Those against. The recommendation is carried. We now move, and you had potential recommendations, Councillor Bevan.
So I'd like to move two further motions in relation to this matter, Chair. The first is basically a rereading of 121, and it would read that HBRIC's Limited's revised mandate consists of managing the port investment. And the second motion would be as follows: that Council seek advice from the Office of the Auditor General on how we should organise our future commercial activities and the role of HBRIC.
Had a mover. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Belford? You want to speak to the...
I don't know whether you can read my writing.
So we'll just get this down and
Council seek advice from the Office of the Auditor General on how we should organise our future commercial activities and the role of HBRIC.
Looks like it.
There was a second one. The first one was just this, with these words left out.
Protest should be just trying to get just one cut.
Oh, so.
No, forget those words, just HBRIC's revised mandate.
Difficult proposition to the public. I just don't see. That's the one. If constituents of the city are saying the
Is that council seek advice?
Even if it's only 6 months.
On how we should organise
parts of refreshing.
our future commercial activities and the role of HBRIC. I think we have the resolution now, Chair.
Sure. So essentially, we'll just make it clear so that I don't. Words up Essentially, the HBRIC Limited's revised mandate consists of managing the port investment. That's as it is at the minute. Do you want to speak to that, Councillor?
Yes, Chair. So this is a logical follow-on from the comments I made during the general discussion before, where there are many moving parts that we need to get good independent advice on before we can decide what the future role of HBRIC is, and what sort of investments we should make and where we should make those investments and who should manage those investments on our behalf. And until we have that advice, I see HBRIC as being in a holding pattern, if you like, managing the port on our behalf until we get that advice. Now, there is a little bit of a difficulty here, I'll acknowledge, with what James has brought up about forestry, but as long as the advice is not unduly delayed, I'm sure we can make appropriate structures available. And if the appropriate structure to manage a forestry investment is HBRIC, then we can bring the necessary expertise onto the board of HBRIC as required. But as I said before, this is form follows function. So let's work out the function of the things we need to do, and then let's work out what advice and directives we need with the expertise we're seeking before we proceed to make those appointments. So in the meantime, I have no problems with the directorship of HBRIC that we've decided today, because as we've agreed, we're in a holding pattern for the next 12 months or so until we get clarity around the other things we need to do as a council.
Thank you, Councillor Bevan. Councillor Belford. No comment.
Question.
Councillor Dick.
What does Councillor Bevan think about his level of remuneration in this new role?
Perhaps I should have added, I'm happy to forego any remuneration at all.
Very good.
Any other comments? Councillor Hewitt.
My comment is, Chair, that your chairing of this has just been mischievous this afternoon, and I don't think it's in the best interest of the council what you've done in the region long term overall.
Well, some big comments there. I mean, incredible. I'll just ignore that. Mr. Paku.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So when I see the recommendation up there, I see the recommendation actually just being 5.1, just in drag. The ownership of the company has moved back to council. The port has moved back to council. The region, the HBRIC is made up of council, either councillors or council staff. Kia ora.
Any other comments? Other than sort of complimentary ones are accepted. Councillor Bailey.
I was trying to think what your new name was, Chair. Mischievous to mischievous. The way I look at it is that at the end of the day, if we have to change the HBRIC's statement of intent at some date in the future, if we bring on new forest investments or however we deal with it after we've got advice from the Auditor General, then we can do that then. It's not necessary to have that all completely tidied up right now, because I seem to recall the statement of intent seemed to get changed like as often as I change my trousers. So, yeah.
Councillor Wilson.
Just very briefly, backing up the comments that our CEO made before, this now limits any activity till 1 July, assuming LTP goes ahead. People need to understand that.
Yep, it does.
No, it doesn't. Doesn't at all. Any other speakers?
I understand what Peter's saying, that you can, that hopefully not a lot of water goes under the bridge, but I'd like to see 1.2 allowing HBRIC to not themselves investigate forestry, but to employ somebody to investigate forestry. Oh, it's an issue for me. I don't think that we want to wait 6 months before we do anything there. I don't want to wait for advice on that. I've had enough advice on it, so I want to be able to say to our potential partners, how are you going to do this, and get the advice on how you want to do this. Can we fit that in there, 1.2 somewhere?
Well, it's essentially bringing back 1.2.1 and your recommendations.
Vote against it. That's the only option.
Well, you could move an amendment, but I would remind councillors that these are recommendations to council. In the intervening 2-week period, you may come up with an amendment that satisfies any intervening concern. Is there any appetite for an amendment to 1.2.2 as it stands now?
There is from me. I will make amendment to that, and managing the port and investigate reforestation. The business of reforestation.
Any seconder for that amendment?
It's not the original.
No appetite for that, councillor, but there may be by the time we get to council on the 28th.
Chair, if I may, you could add to 1.2.3 that you seek advice also on how the council might progress commercial investment in forestry, which would enable us to bring you back some advice potentially by the 28th if we can do it fast enough about the issues that I was referring to earlier, so you can better consider how you might progress that in the absence of existing budget provisions or a commercial vehicle to do that.
Sounds good to me.
So in my view, that's covered in the words already.
Well, it's really only seeking the Auditor General's advice on that, and I'm not sure the Auditor General will give you advice on those questions, and certainly probably not within 2 weeks. So
how would you amend the words to achieve that?
so after HBRIC Limited and advice from staff, on how investigations into commercial investments in forestry could be progressed, and probably just leave it at that.
I'm happy with that. Okay.
Happy with that?
I'm
Moving
happy for
second?
those words to be added.
That's a good good position to be in,
Compromise, yeah.
and we can make our minds up about that advice when it comes through. Any other speakers on the two recommendations?
Mr. Chairman, it's a, I guess it's a pragmatic compromise. But the fact remains that we've neither got a proper investment company board, and therefore we haven't got an organisation that can as it truly should. That's a bit of a muddle in my view.
Any other comments? Councillor Hewitt.
Oh no, mischievous, that does it still, thank you.
Well, you want to continue that line, Councillor, you might have to do it outside. I will take the recommendations separately. Those in favour of 1.2.2 say aye.
Aye.
Those against say no.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Recommendation 1.2.3. Right. Those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those against say no. So it's 1, 2. Do you want a division on that? Division? No? Recorded? Okay. All right. So the recommendations are passed. Is there need for any other recommendation?
Yes, there is, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Dick.
Mr. Chairman, I'd propose that the committee recommends to council that it compliment the retired directors on their commitment to the company and for their commitment and hard work on behalf of the region.
So that's a further recommendation that's seconded by Councillor Wilson. All those in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Oh, sorry, my apologies, Councillor. Do you want to speak to it?
No, well, I just think it's common courtesy.
So, yeah, I agree with you totally. So we put that forward as a recommendation to council. We can speak to it fully at the time. The resolution is passed. Are there any other matters in regard to this item that you want to have advanced or inserted or installed? If not, there are no other items on the agenda, so I'll declare the Corporate and Strategic Committee meeting closed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.